Hi everyone, welcome to lesson 7 of the series here, learning about all things in Flutterflow. So in today's lesson, what we're going to be looking at is a few different widgets you perhaps aren't aware that exist. Now obviously I'm just picking out ones that are likely to be most valued. You can see there are a good many other options available that we can't possibly cover in this. So the three that we're going to have a look at today is, first one is a radio button. And then a page view, and then a stack. So let's get on to a radio button. So I'm going to search in my widget list to find a radio button. Okay, and we'll drag one in. Okay, and we might pop it in the middle. Okay, so basically what a radio button does is it allows the user to be able to select from a set of defined options. Now the key feature of a radio button versus a checkbox, so we'll bring up a checkbox just quickly so you can see one. So there's also a checkbox, so you can either have an individual checkbox or a list of checkboxes. Now you'll learn how to use a list of checkboxes later, but we'll just drag in a checkbox for the moment. Okay, actually we might grab in a list instead, sorry. Okay. Right. So now the difference here is that, and this is the difference between these two options is that in the radio widget, the user can only select one of these options. It must select one of them, and basically it won't allow you to select multiple options. Whereas a checkbox, it will allow you to check multiple options. Now the reason why you're only seeing the one option in the checkbox, not that this video is about the checkbox, is because this particular widget is designed to accept a list. So later on, when we learn about the back end, what you'll be able to do is import lists of data that's been collected either from stored data or whatever into this list, and that will allow the user to collect it. But in short, you'd use a radio button in cases where you want to force a selection. The user must select something, and they are only selecting the one thing. Now to set up the checkbox, there are a couple of different ways that we can do that. Sorry, and the first way is that you can have just a series of options, which is what we'll do today, just to keep it nice and simple. And we might just have yes, no, and maybe as the three options. Okay. Now, the other options, of course, as you can see, is that there are a few different ways that you can set it up, and we'll talk about that, though we won't do a lot of it in this particular video, is you could also assign values. So, for example, if you had a radio button where, depending on what the user had selected, you want to give them different options, you, for example, might assign an app state or a variable to that, so that based on the user, the value of the variable would change, and therefore the value that appears here would change. So you could do that by doing here, and let's say we had radio output, you could select that, and that would place in whatever the value was of that particular um, variable. Okay, so that's one way to do it. Now another way to do it, again, it's beyond where we are at this point in time, is that you can also create a series of choices based on a list. So one of the things that we haven't done a lot of yet, and we will be doing a little bit later on in the course, is cases where you have an app state, but the app state is a list. So for example, if you had let's say yes, no, and maybe in a list under an app state saying options, for example, what you could do is that you could call up that particular app state. We haven't currently got one there, okay, because there's no acceptable option because you need a list variable to be able to do that. But that's another way to do it. Okay, now in terms of the appearance, the way that this thing looks is much the same as other widgets we've done. You can change the color, you can change the style, you can change the style of text just by having a bit of a look around down here, the size, all that sort of stuff. You can add padding, you can do all that sorts of things. So I'm not going to worry too much about doing that at this point. But the key thing we want to be able to do is we want to be able to make sure that we can get that value off the page that the user selects. And that's actually really simple to do. So you could add a button and then get the value of the widget, or you can just we can take it directly from the widget and assign the value. So that's what I'm going to do. Now, to be able to see the value that we get when we put an action in, we need somewhere to display it. So I'm going to add a text box now, and this is just purely here to show what the value has returned. Okay, so in this case, and I might make that look a little bit prettier and put in some padding. Okay. Now the next thing we need to do in order to display the value, what we need is we need a variable that we can assign the user's selection. Now I've already done that, so if you go across to just to save a little bit of time in the video, I have one here called radio output, and I've made it a string. And the reason I've made it a string rather than an integer or something else is because there are 3 values in there and they're text values. So to assign that, I'm going to go here and I'm going to assign this text box. Instead of hello world, I'm going to assign it to that output, that radio output variable that we've created. Okay. Now, once we've done that, the next step is we need to assign an action to it. So I'm going to go to the action here and I'm going to add an action. Okay, and you'll see that here we have on selected. So this means that this value will appear once it's selected. Now to do this, I'm going to go to state management. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select that radio output. So we want to assign that value so it will then appear in the text box here. And so I'm going to add my field, which is a radio output. Okay, and then the next thing we need to do is we need to tell it what we're assigning it to. So we're going to set the value, and then we can go into that little orange button. And instead of app state, what we're interested in widget state. So widget state is, if I haven't explained that in the course previously, widget state is where you can get values that are currently held by widgets on the screen. Okay, so now there's only one suitable option in this case, which is the radio button. Okay, and so once we've done that, then what we can do is that we can test it out. So to do that, I'm going to do an instant reload. It should come up in a second. Okay, so we go across to our page. We've got our yes, no, and maybe. And you're not seeing anything on the screen at the moment because I haven't actually selected anything as yet. So therefore there's no value there. Now if I wanted a value to appear as a default, I can set the default in, not that I've done it here, but you can set the default radio value. If I go across to the in this area here. So if you wanted, for example, the initial value to always be yes, you can put in the initial option and it will place the selection there. Okay, but once we've selected it and we click no, then what happens is that every time we select it, that action runs, and now we're getting the value from the variable. Now, just a reminder too that when you're trying to work out if something's not working the way it should, you can always look at over here what's actually happened. So you can see the radio value has been selected, and as you go through, it changes to whatever's been selected. And down here, of course, you can also see the variable value changing as that action is executed. Okay, so that's pretty much how you create a radio button. And obviously, radio buttons are really useful if you only have a couple of choices. If, for example, you wanted to have a larger range of choices, you might go for something like, and we'll just quickly do this as well, so you're getting introduced to more and more widgets. You might do a drop-down box. Okay, so I drag a drop-down box in here. you'll see that the drop-down box has much of the same sorts of options. You can put yes, no, maybe in here. You can assign values and you can add a list. So you can see that the way the widget works applies to several other widgets that we have, but we won't go through that today. Right, so that's the first widget. The second one we want to have a look at, which is quite different to what we're doing here, so I'm just deleting these things off the screen so we can start again, is this time we're going to go for a page view. Now the reason I selected a page view is it gives you a bit more of an idea of some of the ways that you can display data. Okay, so the next two that we're doing are pretty much all about how you can arrange your user interface. Okay, so we'll grab a page view and we'll right now and explain what it does. So we'll drag one in. So what a page view does is you'll see that there are three dots down here, and I might just bring this down in size. You'll see there's three dots in here, and so what this is creating is multiple pages. So just so you can see what's going on, what we'll do is in the first page, and you'll see what happens is it works similar to the expander widget that we were looking at in the last lesson, in that it automatically creates a bit of quite a few items in the widget tree. So in this column here, which is the first page, what we can do is we can add in a container. And so I'm going to add a container into each one of these, and so we can see what's going on. Okay. Now for each container, just bear with me while I set these things up. It decides to be nice to me and actually do what I'm asking. Okay, two containers are enough to show anyway. Okay, so if we want to do our container, let's say we want to, just so we can see, we're going to give it different colors. So I'm just going to give the first one green, and the second container on the second page, I'm going to give a different color, which is the secondary color. Now, what you can see now is that, oops, I've done it on, sorry, I've done it twice on the same container, so you can't see what's going on. Okay, so now we've got two containers of different colors, it should be. There we go. Okay, so basically, basically what you can do is that you can have a look at multiple page. Okay, so the way that you can do that is, sorry, we're in the wrong, we need to go to the actual page view widget. Sorry about that. Page view. Okay, so now we're on the page view widget. So you can either select the active page. So for each one of these pages, you can basically scroll from left to right in a page, and it shows you here with this, the position. It will show you how many pages there are. Okay, and if we want to go to page 3, you'll see that the green dot moves across automatically. So basically, this allows you to store multiple pages and allow the user to swipe the entire page left or right to be able to see the output. And if you want to add an extra page, we can add one now. We can end up, you can see that there are 4. Now, obviously, as per usual, you can control the height. You can allow swiping or not. So, for example, the default is allowing someone to swipe. You might, on the other hand, have a reason for not allowing that to occur. So, for example, you may have a multi-page form that you're getting people to fill in, and let's say you don't want this page to advance to the next one unless they have completed everything. That's an example. But basically, that's how you create one of these. You can change the indicator style and all that sort of stuff just by having a little bit of a mess around with the way that things work. But essentially, that's what a page view does. So let's just quickly, so you can see it on the screen, what it does. So we have to rerun our test mode while we're waiting. It'll come up in a second. Okay, so we go to the page where we are. Okay, so we have first page, and you can see we're allowing the user to scroll left and right, and of course, what I'll do is just zoom it down so you can see the bottom of the page, which should have the indicator. Sorry, a bit far. You can see that if I move left, right, and I'm moving across, moving through the pages. So that's another option for layout that gives a bit more dynamic control. Okay, so the last one we're going to have a look at, so I'm going to delete all of these now, and we'll go back to where we were. Okay, so we've got a fresh, clean page. Now the last one we're going to have a look at today is a stack. So what a stack does is a stack allows you, so far with all of the widgets for layout, rows and columns and all that sort of stuff, basically it's laid out all the widgets in 2 dimensions, which means that you can move one to the side, above or below, and you can scroll through it left or right or whatever. In this one, stacking allows you to actually stack on top of each other. So what we need is a stack widget. Okay, and then we've got our stack widget, and we might make that infinite width. And within that stack widget, again, what we might do is we might start by adding a container. Okay. Now, for the container, what happens is you can lay a second widget on top. So let's add another container there. Now, if we look at the first container, and this is an important thing to understand, and let's say we pick a color like this, and so we've got green for there, and we've got another container here. What you'll notice is, firstly, when I change that color, nothing happened, even though it's telling me. Now, if I change the color on top, what you'll notice is this time you should be able to see the color change. Okay. Now, the reason why you can't see that is that stacking, when you're stacking something one on top of another, elements get a priority. So basically, the order of appearance in the stack is a container. The one here, the lower container in the widget tree, is actually the one that's on top. The one that's below, which is why you can't see it, is the container here. So if we do some changes now to its default position, and we can do that, what you can see is all of a sudden that we're changing the location of it. So you can see that in the first option here, where we've got them both in exactly the same position, you can't see it, and so that tells you that this lower container here, which is this one here, has priority over that one. So basically, if you want to build up a stack, you would build it up starting at your bottom layer, and then next layer, etc. Now, some couple of features with this, just some general things that are fairly simple. Firstly is that if you're clicking on the stack, this alignment here, which you see a lot in a lot of other widgets, basically selects the position of the child widget. Okay, so you can have a default widget in the middle, right? Now, it hasn't moved it because I have already selected something. But you can see that as soon as I select the one for the child widget, in this case the container, and I change it, what happens is it gets overridden. So basically you can set a default position of the widget as the center one, which means that every widget that goes in will go into that center area. But if you want to override that to have, which is of course what you'll probably want to do, then you can actually override its alignment based on the individual child widget so that you can move them around the screen. Now, so far this is all very wonderful, but not all that useful. So obviously what we're going to do is do a quick example to show you how you might use it. And there are many different ways to use it, of course. So what I'm going to do is, firstly, I'm going to change the width to infinite, okay, which means it's going to stretch across the screen. Okay. And then for the second one, I'm going to change also to infinite. Okay. So now we have the two widgets back on top of each other. And just to make them all look a little bit better, we always want a little bit of padding. So add some padding to both. And as soon as I add padding, you'll see that they're actually underneath each other. Okay, but I'm going to add the same padding to both for this purpose of this exercise. Okay, so one of the things that you might consider in the way that you lay things out is that Stacking can be used either to do things like, for example, you often see that in videos where they have on websites where they have, let's say, an image, and you have the capacity to have a little heart in the corner, and someone, to say we like that particular picture. Um, and so that's an example where you might have the base load as a container, might be an image, and then you might have an object, a heart, which can be placed in the bottom corner on top of it, and then obviously you can have a button that clicks and becomes active. So that's one way to do it. Now another way to do it is you can use stacks as another way to provide the user a hint that there is additional information that's available. So what we can do there is that we can do it for a couple of things. Is that instead of just doing the alignment, I might put in 0.9. Hopefully that works as expected. Okay, can't quite see it at the moment. Let's try again. I think it's minus 0.9 or 0.7, let's say. Put in a minus. Okay, they're still on top of each other. Maybe I haven't set the stack properly. Just bear with me. Let's make the stack a bit bigger so we can see what's going on. Okay, there we go. That's better. Sorry about that. That was just the setting on the stack. Okay, sorry, back to where we were. So, for example, what we can do now, and I know these colors look horrible, but if we go back to what we're doing, so we can move the stack position around. So let's say we want this at 0.8. So what you can do is you can put you can stack so the user can see that there's something behind there. Okay. And so it's a hint that there's additional content. So that's another way to squeeze more content onto your page. So for example, if you wanted to then insert a text box into there, and then we might have text box number 2, you can see that you can give some of that, a hint to the user about what is behind the stack. Okay, so hopefully that kind of makes sense as to what a stack does, and that's just a widget that you probably wouldn't have necessarily thought was there. Okay, I hope you found the video useful, and we'll catch you next time. Cheers, guys.